Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Mr. B. I am providing you the latest development in the Iran war. It appears as if the war is progressing. There's been 10 to 12 consecutive days of attacks since the ceasefire, and we are going to join First Post with the latest developments on it. So let's jump right into it.
We begin with the war in West Asia. Last night, the United States carried out multiple airstrikes in Iran. This was the 12th consecutive night of bombing. The U.S. Central Command has released footage of the airstrikes. President Donald Trump says the U.S. is winning the war. He made the claim while attending the funeral of an American soldier who was killed by Iranian attacks.
So we're likewise winning in the Islamic Republic of Iran, and we're ensuring that they will never, ever be able to do to us what they've done to so many.
Now, the United States has deployed overwhelming air power against Iran. Despite that, Iran keeps fighting. This morning, the IRGC, or the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, retaliated. They fired a wave of ballistic missiles and drones and struck multiple U.S. military sites in the region. As per reports, Iran hit at least 4 American camps in Kuwait, along with U.S. forces stationed in Jordan. Iran claims it has destroyed a Patriot air defense battery and an MQ-9 drone depot in Kuwait. But the main story is from Jordan, where Iran claims to have struck a THAAD battery, along with a Patriot system and a C-RAM radar. This is what Iran is claiming. And even if every claim may not be accurate, the bigger picture is impossible to ignore. Iran has found a way to crack the world's most expensive air defense shield. Let's break it down for you. THAAD stands for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. This is an anti-ballistic missile system. One entire unit costs up to $3 billion. Now let's look at the Patriot, an air defense system meant to intercept drones, jets, and missiles. Each unit costs $4 million. Then we have the C-RAM radar. C-RAM stands for Counter Rocket Artillery and Mortar. It shoots down ground-launched short-range weapons. This radar costs $15 million. The THAAD, the Patriot, and the C-RAM work in tandem.
EVE to me is basically freedom. It's a giant open universe where you can do whatever you
blow them up, using just cheap Shahed drones and missiles, destroying sophisticated weapons of the United States. It's not just about eliminating equipment. It is about challenging the image of American invincibility. And the list of losses is only growing for Donald Trump. The United States has lost more than 40 aircraft. Dozens of radars and air defense systems are now offline. Even vital command centers have been destroyed. And these are just military assets. The human cost is also climbing. As per reports, at least 18 U.S. troops have been killed since the war began. More than 550 are wounded. They are undergoing medical treatment. Clearly, Trump's war is taking a toll on American troops and assets. That does not mean the United States is losing the war. America does have the advantage. It has a bigger air force. It has satellites for intelligence and the ability to carry out long-range precision strikes. But overwhelming power doesn't mean absolute control. Iran has shown that it can absorb the impact. It can retaliate on its own terms. An uncomfortable reality that Washington has to face. Because as the fighting drags on, Iran keeps proving that it has the missiles, it has the drones, but most importantly, it has the willingness to fight. So what is Washington doing about it? Setting new records for military spending. The United States has passed the 2027 defense budget. It's a whopping $1.5 trillion, the largest defense bill in American history. The House of Representatives voted 216 to 212 in favor. Last year, the defense budget was $900 billion. Now it has been capped at $1.5 trillion. That is a spike of nearly 66%. Any guesses who's paying? Ordinary American taxpayers. This war has exposed the U.S. war machinery in more ways than one. American dominance is being challenged by cheap Iranian drones. U.S. military assets seem exhausted, overstretched. They are unable to defend against the swarms of aerial attacks. The world's so-called strongest military has just discovered that even billion-dollar shields can be cracked. A war has two sides. One that you can see, missiles, bombs, people dying, the human cost. And the other one that is not visible to the eyes, that is fought through spies, intelligence, satellites. That is what our next story is about. A new report by Reuters exposes something explosive, a possible secret alliance between Russia and Iran against the United States. Now, reports of Russia supporting or helping Iran in its strikes against US targets in the Gulf are not new. But what's new is this. During the ongoing war, Iran struck at least two sites belonging to America's Central Intelligence Agency. One of the facilities was located in Riyadh's US embassy. The other one was in eastern Iraq. Some reports say additional sites were attacked, but the details have not been disclosed yet. The report alleges that Tehran had help from Moscow in locating and bombing these facilities. The report mentions a memo, and according to the memo, Iran used Russian enhanced Shahed drones for attacks on these CIA sites. The strike appeared almost surgical. The first drone punched a hole through a vulnerable section of the embassy. Seconds later, a second drone flew through that opening. This is precision in its finest form. And that's why questions are being raised. How could Iran achieve such accuracy? Because CIA stations are among the most secretive American facilities overseas. You won't find their names on Google Maps. They're hidden inside embassies, safe houses, logistics hubs, surveillance centers. Most people don't even know they exist, yet somehow Iranian drones allegedly found them. That is exactly what American investigators are trying to understand. And the answer may lie in the technology. Previous reports have stated that Russia helped improve Iran's Shahed drones with an advanced satellite navigation system called the Cometa-M. Unlike conventional navigation systems, this one reportedly is more resistant to electronic jamming. In simple terms, imagine trying to follow Google Maps during a storm. Most GPS signals become unreliable. Cometa-M is like having a guide who keeps finding the road, even when someone is trying to block your route. That dramatically improves accuracy. The Wall Street Journal reported earlier that Russia transferred this technology to Iran. The Kremlin, of course, denied it. Russia and Iran have cooperated for years. That is not new. But if Moscow helped target sensitive CIA-linked sites, everything changes. It would suggest Russia is no longer just supplying weapons. It could be actively helping disrupt American intelligence operations at a time when Washington is already struggling to contain the war. The fears only grew after another attack. Iran struck a US airbase in Jordan. Ballistic missiles precisely hit army barracks. 2 American soldiers were killed. Investigators are now probing whether Russian targeting support may have played a role there as well. There are additional allegations against Russia also. US intelligence analysts are reportedly looking into whether Iran relied on Russian targeting of data for the US embassy attack in Saudi Arabia. Investigators are keeping an open mind, though. Some believe Iran may simply have been aiming for the US embassy and accidentally hit the CIA station housed inside. That's entirely possible. Yet others see a different picture. They argue that very few countries possess the capability to obtain intelligence this sensitive.
With this particular story, I think it's important to note that Russia may very well be actually helping Iran, because we're very well helping Ukraine. And, you know, I'm a fan of Trump. I've supported him in the past. I don't like anything he's doing pertaining to war. None of his foreign policies right now is something that is appealing to me. It is not at all any of the reasons why I personally voted for him. But that being said, you can't antagonize your enemies that you're trying to make friends. And I think Trump's whole thing was to be friendly with Russia. But he's taken certain steps, like giving Ukraine certain access to long-range missiles, that does not support the friendship. And I think Russia, who's not overtly, coming against the United States, but now they're assisting the enemy of the United States. So it's the same way that if we're assisting the enemy of Russia, Ukraine, then you could expect that they're going to assist your enemy against you. And so it would not be shocking to anyone if Russia was indeed giving them, technology or giving them assistance to fight back, because I think in Russia's eyes and the eyes of others, the U.S. is the one who provoked this war. This was not something that came out of nowhere. We attacked them and they're defending themselves. And so I think now they are getting assistance from not just Russia, but also China. These are people who have a vested stake in seeing us fail. So, it would not behoove the president to think that there are outside assistance being provided. Now, the question becomes, why would we continue to escalate this until it gets to a place where, or the point of no return, if you will, right? If they are getting involved more and more as the cover gets pulled, it just now means that instead of fighting a proxy war, we're going to now end up fighting them. And the bill just went from 36 billion. I'm sorry, I think it was less than 36 billion to like 36 billion. And they're projecting it to be upwards of 50 billion. And the American people are not interested in funding this war. We haven't even officially declared war. This operation is costing us $50 billion. And I don't think people have an appetite for it. I don't know that Trump is in the right positions. Gas prices are going back up and things are not moving the way that I think he anticipated they would be. So it's not a good look at all, especially if Russia and the bigger superpowers are getting involved.
And even fewer beyond Russia would have the motivation to use it against the United States, which is why no final conclusion has been reached. Intelligence isn't built on assumptions. It's built on probabilities. And probabilities take time. So why would Russia even consider taking such a risk? There are three reasons. Number one, Ukraine. The United States remains deeply invested in supporting Kyiv. Every additional crisis in West Asia forces Washington to divide its military assets, its intelligence resources, its diplomatic attention. Strategic distraction is sometimes as valuable as strategic victory. Number two, Russia and Iran are no longer just trading partners, they're becoming security partners. Iran supplied thousands of Shahed drones that Russia has used extensively in Ukraine. Russia, according to multiple reports, has gradually transferred military expertise back to Tehran. This relationship is no longer one-sided, it's reciprocal. And together, they complicate America's calculations. And number three, both Moscow and Tehran have a shared objective, reducing US influence across West Asia. They don't need identical interests, they only need overlapping ones. As they say, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. If investigators eventually confirm Russian assistance, the consequences could be enormous. Washington would no longer see these attacks as merely Iranian operations. It would view them as part of a broader strategic contest involving Moscow. Expect intelligence cooperation with Gulf allies to intensify. Expect tighter export controls on advanced navigation systems. Expect stricter sanctions on technologies that can make cheap drones deadlier. Because the age of proxy wars is evolving. Countries no longer have to send armies across borders. Sometimes technology, intelligence, and a willing ally are just enough to change the course of a conflict.
Listen up, parents. Want to start building generational wealth and happiness for your children in less than 10 minutes? Well, Fabric by Gerber Life has an investment account called a UGMA that you can open on behalf of your kids. You can contribute as little as $20 a month, go at your own pace, and watch the power of compounding returns help your investment grow with your...
Any worse in West Asia, a brand new front. Just when you thought things couldn't get any worse in West Asia, a brand new front has opened up, threatening to engulf the entire world with it. The Strait of Hormuz was already on edge after days of US and Iran's eye for eye campaign of attacks. Now the Red Sea is under fire again. The Iran-backed Houthis have claimed their first attack on commercial shipping in the Red Sea in months. Now that's worrisome. Remember the Gaza war? Remember when Houthi attacks turned the Red Sea into a war zone, forcing ships to take the long way around Africa, sending freight costs soaring, and driving up the price of everything from oil to food? Well, that nightmare is back. Only this time, the world has far more to lose, because this could be the first time that the world's two biggest energy choke points, that is, the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea, are under threat at the same time. So if you thought over $90 oil was bad enough, wait until tankers stop sailing and the world starts scrambling for supply all over again. Let's start with the oil markets first. Today, the world woke up to crude closing in on $100 mark, because every threat to the Red Sea, every threat to the Strait of Hormuz is now being added to the price of a barrel of oil. That is why Brent has hit $100 a barrel, while WTI, that's the main pricing benchmark for North American crude oil, has continued its sharp rally. Both oil benchmarks have reached their highest levels in more than 6 weeks. The global oil market is responding to the possibility that two of the world's most important shipping routes could be paralyzed at the same time. Now let's look at what's happening on the ground. On one side, you have the United States and Iran engaged in 12 consecutive days of renewed strikes. On the other, there is Red Sea, where the Yemen-based rebel group has targeted 2 Saudi Arabian oil tankers with missiles and drones. The Saudi government confirmed an attack on one refined products tanker called the Ancelia, and the Houthis confirmed that the second tanker, Leila, is a crude oil carrier. The Houthis have already warned international shipping companies to stay away from Saudi ports after declaring the maritime blockade on Monday. Some vessels are already reportedly avoiding the Bab al-Mandeb Strait at the mouth of the Red Sea. And that could push oil prices even higher. You see, the Red Sea had become Saudi Arabia's main alternative export route, allowing its oil to bypass the Strait of Hormuz, where commercial traffic has almost come to a standstill. Now even that backup route is under pressure. And if commercial ships keep returning back, the shock won't just hit oil. It will also hit global shipping, freight costs, supply chains once again. But Washington, it's not worried, it seems. US President Donald Trump says the United States doesn't need the Strait of Hormuz. But even if America buys less Gulf oil, global price shocks still hit US consumers. Still, posting on Truth Social today, Trump warned Iran that the US will hold it directly responsible for any future Houthi attacks on commercial shipping. He described the Houthis, and I'm quoting here, a surrogate and or proxy of Iran, and warned that if they strike again, major military punishment will be inflicted. Earlier, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the Houthis were dragged into the Red Sea attacks by Iranians.
You know, the Houthis largely were smart and stayed out of all this throughout the conflict, but they now apparently have gotten themselves suckered into this, going after Saudi Arabia and their ships. And by the way, that's, you know, I was reading reports a few hours ago that there was actually a Saudi fuel ship that's flagged Chinese. It's a Chinese ship. Are they going to blow up the Chinese ship and this becomes a problem for China? This will become a problem for the whole world. But I hope that will de-escalate, because I think the Houthis, frankly, got snookered into this thing by the Iranians.
But Iran's response has been just as blunt. Its parliament speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, warned, and I'm quoting, if Iran cannot sell oil, no one in the Gulf will sell oil. That warning, albeit shocking, has stopped feeling like just war rhetoric. The oil market is certainly not treating it like rhetoric. It is pricing it in, barrel by barrel, like we just told you, by cutting off the Red Sea. Maybe one crisis too many, because every ship that avoids the Bab al-Mandeb has to take the long route around Africa. That adds weeks to the journey. It pushes up freight costs, pushes up insurance, and ultimately, it pushes up the price of everything: fuel, food, everyday goods. So this is no longer just about Iran or the United States. It's not just about Hormuz. It's not even just about the Red Sea. It is about whether the world can afford two energy choke points to go up in flames at the same time. Because the way things are going right now, the escalation ladder is only getting taller. And the bill for you and I is only getting bigger.
This is a very valid point. The war ultimately is causing more and more damage to people, especially if your budget is tight. So the more fighting, now there's two choke points. That means the supply chains are being restricted. And so it's taking longer for products to get into different countries, different continents, and the costs of said products getting to those continents are increasing, which means the cost will eventually be passed down to us. And in an economy that is not as strong, where people are losing jobs and things of that nature, and you're going into an election year, this is not the position for Donald Trump to find himself in. Yet, he's a personality type that once he doubles down on something, he doubles down. And unfortunately, while that could be good in business, in politics, that may not be the greatest thing, because, you know, your stubbornness could lead to a lot of people getting hurt. And now you're seeing an increase in body count. You're seeing an increase in escalation. You're seeing an increase in cost. I think crude oil has gone back up close to $100. It's just not trending in the right direction. And I pray, when I encourage others to pray, that Trump has a change of mind and a change of heart on this particular matter. I don't know what choke point his partners may have on him, but it's definitely affecting his ability to rationalize the decision. You know, you're either going to double down and go all the way in, and if you do, it just ensures more lives, more costs, and higher cost of living for everyone else. But if you pull away, maybe you take it on the chin, but you still can preserve your power and, you know, continue on other agenda items that you have for your presidency. So I don't know that he's making the wisest decision by continue to double down on something that's clearly not yielding the results that he wants.
Now let's turn to the Indo-Pacific. In a first, the US has deployed hypersonic missiles closer to China, known as the Dark Eagle. This weapon can reach speeds greater than Mach 5. That is more than 5 times the speed of sound. The US deployed the missile to a tiny fortified island called Guam. From there, mainland China is in striking range. The missile can reach Beijing in less than 20 minutes. The deployment comes at a time of rising Chinese aggression, particularly against Japan and the Philippines. For years, America watched China sprint ahead in the hypersonic race, but it looks like that chapter may now be ending. Our next report tells you more.
For nearly a decade, the US watched its adversaries zoom past in the hypersonic race. China has built and unveiled a handful of hypersonic missiles. Russia has even combat tested its hypersonic weapons in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the US has struggled. Washington has acknowledged at least 5 failed hypersonic tests in recent years. The missile suffered technical malfunctions, or the program became too costly. But the US is now turning a new page. It has, for the first time, deployed its hypersonic missile, and that too in the Indo-Pacific, taking the region by surprise. The missile in focus is called the Dark Eagle, and the US is putting it to the test by deploying it in the heavily fortified island called Guam. But first, let's take a look at the missile. The Dark Eagle is America's first hypersonic weapon that has completed trials. The missile is made by Lockheed Martin. Only the US Army and the US Navy operate it. The Dark Eagle can reach speeds greater than Mach 5. As per the Pentagon, the missile can travel up to 3,500 kilometers. The warhead is a glide vehicle, which means it can change its trajectory and altitude mid-flight, making it unpredictable and almost impossible to intercept. Until now, only China and Russia had such hypersonic capabilities, but the US is slowly catching up with the competition. What's more interesting is where the missile has been deployed, which brings us to Guam, a tiny island in the Pacific Ocean, also known as America's unsinkable aircraft carrier. Guam has 3 different bases for the US Army, Air Force, and Navy. It's protected by THAAD and Patriot batteries, giving the island 360-degree air defenses. The US Navy operates aircraft carriers and submarines from the island, while the US Air Force deploys B-52 and B-2 nuclear strategic bombers. It is estimated that Guam sits on 900,000 kilograms of explosives. And now, Washington has added its hypersonic missile to Guam's inventory. The missile was deployed during the multinational Valiant Shield exercise, which included the participation of Japan and Australia. So, why was the Dark Eagle deployed in Guam? Because the island is 3,000 kilometers from mainland China, close enough to project military power, yet far enough to stay outside the range of China's missiles. Or that's what Washington thought. Until China unveiled the DF-26 a few years ago. A hypersonic missile with a range of 5,000 kilometers, the DF-26 has been nicknamed the Guam Killer. That's because it can strike America's air bases and naval docks in the Pacific. So, with the deployment of its own hypersonic weapon, America is sending a message. If Guam is in range of Beijing's missiles, China too is in Washington's reach. With a range of 3,500 kilometers, the Dark Eagle can strike mainland China, including the capital Beijing. With a speed of Mach 5, which is 5 times the speed of sound, the missile, if launched from Guam, would reach Beijing in just 20 minutes. But there's another reason why the Dark Eagle has been deployed: growing Chinese aggression. In recent days, China clashed with the Philippine Navy. China also carried out live-fire drills in Japan's exclusive economic zone. With the US deploying its hypersonic missile to Guam, it serves as a warning to China. But it also sends a message to Washington's allies. Trump's America First policy has cast doubt on US ambitions in the Indo-Pacific, and it looks like Washington is answering those concerns, not with words, but with hypersonic missiles.
Now, what do the leaders of the world's biggest democracies have in common? They don't sleep, or at least that's what they want you to believe. US President Donald Trump says he sleeps 4 to 5 hours. Former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher made 4 hours of sleep part of her political legend. And Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has now officially entered the Sleepless Leaders Club because she says she gets 0 to 3 hours of sleep only. We're not surprised. Leaders have worn sleep deprivation like a badge of honor. The less they sleep, the harder they want us to believe that they're working. But if our leaders are sleeping less, are their countries actually doing any better? That's the question we were left asking ourselves when recently, as Japan celebrated a 3-day national holiday, its Prime Minister Takaichi posted on X that she spent the entire break reading policy papers, catching up on government files, and finishing household chores that she'd been putting off. Then came a confession that stirred a massive debate in Japan. She said that for the first time in a while, she was able to get 5 hours of sleep. She revealed that since assuming office in October last year, sleeping 0 to 3 hours a night had become the norm for her. She posted, and I'm quoting, "I can work hard again from tomorrow." Now, this isn't the first time Takaichi has made her work ethic part of her political brand. When she became Japan's first female prime minister last year, she declared, and I'm quoting, "I will abandon the phrase work-life balance." She had said, "I will work, 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 and keep on working." She even urged members of her party, and I'm quoting again, work like workhorses. Months later, she told Parliament that she usually sleeps around 2 hours a night. And she even faced criticism after summoning government aides to the Prime Minister's residence at 3 o'clock in the morning to prepare for a budget session. Now, her supporters call it dedication. Her critics say she is glorifying sleep deprivation in a country that has spent years trying to escape its reputation for deadly overwork. Now, you remember, this is Japan, the country that gave the world the word karoshi, which means death from overwork. Traditionally, Japan's work culture has rewarded self-sacrifice, long hours at work, at times at the expense of employee health and family life. And government officials are equally expected to dedicate long hours and put their public duty over their personal lives. But the world has changed. The days of glorifying exhaustion are also slowly coming to an end. In Japan especially, this is true. Let's rewind to 2015. 24-year-old Matsuri Takahashi died by suicide after working more than 100 hours of overtime a month at a Japanese advertising firm. Her death shocked Japan. It triggered a national reckoning about a work culture that had long celebrated, as we mentioned earlier, self-sacrifice at the cost of human lives. And she wasn't the last. In the years that followed, several Japanese bureaucrats also died by suicide in cases linked to extreme overwork. The backlash forced change. After Takahashi's death, the government stepped up its work style reform agenda, including capping overtime at 45 hours a month. More employers also understand that holidays help employee productivity. More companies also began to accept a simple fact that well-rested employees are more productive employees, which is why Prime Minister Takaichi's remarks have sparked such a debate. Japan is asking, are we supposed to celebrate exhaustion and sleeplessness? For the rest of the world too, it is an important question to ask because Takaichi isn't alone. Most leaders around the world have long competed over who sleeps the least. They tell us that they're always working, always available, and always sacrificing more than anyone else for the public good. It's classic leadership theater. And politicians understand the power of symbolism better than anyone else. It's a compelling imagery, sometimes compelling enough to win your vote. But what do medical experts say? This isn't new information. Experts say there is nothing heroic about chronic sleep deprivation. It is scientifically and universally acknowledged that too little sleep can impair judgment, memory, emotional control, and decision-making. Sleep is not a luxury. It's a biological necessity. Chronic sleep loss has been linked to poorer decision-making, mental fatigue, and a higher risk of serious health problems. So when leaders boast about how little they sleep, are they really showing strong leadership or just bad decision-making? Here's our 2 cents. A leader's job is not to stay awake the longest. It is to make the best decisions for its people. Nobody expects their leaders to be sleep deprived. They expect them to be clear-headed, level-headed, and capable of making the right call when it matters the most. Because a country can survive a leader who sleeps 8 hours, but it may not survive one who makes a bad decision, half awake and exhausted at 3 a.m.
I would say I definitely agree with this point. It's true that our society tells us that we have to overwork ourselves to a point where we're working long hours, and that's supposed to be the standard. And unfortunately, when you have presidents that don't sleep, and then you catch them at certain press conferences, dozing off because they've been up all night, it does make you question whether or not they are making sound decisions while they are having these sleepless work sessions. And to me, I don't think you get any extra bonus points for making poor decisions or decisions when you're under duress or sleep deprived or things of that nature. I actually think that I think it's considered torture if you keep someone up and then whatever it is they say, you know, to you can't even be taken seriously because they were sleep deprived when they made the statement. So I don't know why that's a badge of honor, but you know, you do get delusional when you lose sleep. And to me, I don't think any of the leaders get any bonus points for not getting any sleep or not getting a suffice amount of sleep. And so for that reason, you know, I definitely think that that was a good point and a good segment, you know, that people have to really consider. Are the leaders that we elect being responsible even with their own personal lives and health? Are they getting the adequate amount of sleep to ensure that they're making the best decisions possible? And I think that comes into question now more so, given the types of decisions that it's been being made by our leaders. You know, I think that that's something that we have to analyze too as voters, whether or not we're selecting people that's responsible over their personal health and as well as their sleep.
Our next story is about the US crackdown on immigrants. It is one of the US government's top priorities under President Donald Trump. Trump has promised mass deportations while campaigning in 2024, and he actually went to work on this as soon as he came to power. Over the past 18 months, the United States has seen masked agents target people across American cities. The infamous ICE agents. ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It's an agency under the US Department of Homeland Security, or DHS. And over the past 18 months, ICE has earned a reputation for violence. At least 23 people have been shot by ICE agents. 6 have been killed. 3 of them were US citizens. As you can imagine, this hasn't been taken well by a lot of Americans.
Just like we're seeing,
we have got to the point where literally anybody can build a fully working app without knowing how to code. This is Base 40.
And all across the country, communities everywhere are coming out to say that they resist and they reject the violence that ICE is unleashing on all of our communities all over the place. We've seen this, very tragically and very dramatically on a few occasions over this past year, most significantly, in recent memory with the tragic killing of 3 men by ICE agents in all of these cities, over the past 8 days. And of course, the 2 folks who were murdered, Alex Preddy and Renee Good, who were murdered by ICE in January of this year.
Now, the violence by ICE has led to a lot of backlash, and this is something that the Trump administration is well aware of. It knows that the backlash could hamper its mass deportation agenda. So the US government is diversifying. It isn't putting all its eggs in one basket. Alongside the violence by ICE agents, the DHS is also using the threat of massive fines. Fines that go as high as $1.8 million. And here's how it works. The DHS is charging undocumented immigrants a fine of $998 a day. This is for each day spent in the United States after a judge ruled that they have no right to stay. There's a statute of limitations on the fines. They can't go beyond 5 years, but 5 years means more than 1,800 days. And about $1,000 a day adds up to over $1.8 million. Let's face it, most migrants who are in the United States illegally do not have that kind of money. If they did, they would have probably found a way to get citizenship. So the fine isn't realistic, and it isn't meant to be. It's another way to put pressure on undocumented immigrants and force them to leave. The DHS says that it will waive the fine if the migrants self-deport. It's actually in a flyer that is sent along with the fine. This puts the migrants in a tough position. Either they leave behind the lives they built in the United States, or they lose all their money and risk getting deported by ICE. The DHS has also issued fines to more than 103,000 people. The fines actually come up to over $84 billion. Now, the agency is highly unlikely to collect anywhere near that amount. But that isn't the goal. The goal is applying pressure and getting people to self-deport. The DHS has threatened to send debt collectors after the immigrants it has fined. There are instances of the US government seizing tax refunds. It has also threatened to take wages directly. The whole exercise is meant to make living in the United States impossible. But here's the problem, which many of you may have already spotted. Some of the migrants being fined pay taxes. It implies they have valid work permits. This happens if migrants are trying to make their stay in the United States legal, even if they entered illegally. They may be trying to seek asylum. And just because one judge asked them to leave, it doesn't mean they're not exploring other legal avenues. But reports say the DHS does not make exceptions. It is apparently fining everyone, irrespective of circumstances. Welcome to Trump's America.
Okay, in this last segment pertaining to fines by the Department of Homeland Security, I think the deportation thing Trump had as part of an agenda item is being handled really bad. And if I had to grade him on this, I can understand where he's coming from in principle and that he's enforcing the law by ensuring that, you know, he creates borders for the country and by deterring illegal entrance into the country. I can understand that he is the commander-in-chief whose ultimate decision has to be obeyed. At the same time, in practice, the way he is going about it, I think leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. And I think it bodes negatively upon him and his party. And when people are dying, and some of the people that's died have been citizens or people maybe with legitimate right to be in the country, and you got ICE agents just kind of doing vigilante policing and causing a disturbance, not just in a community, but also in a state, as you saw with Minnesota. There's some people that died there before they pulled out. Maine, there was just a guy that died there before they pulled out. The more and more this happens, the more and more it may leave a bad taste in people's mouths, right? As you think about it, you know, a lot of people can understand why there's a need to deport a lot of the, you know, people that came in here illegally. But if the way you're going about it is in an inhumane way, you may change the opinions of the people who want those people deported to look at you negatively, right? And so I think for that reason, Trump has to manage the optics. It's not just about whether or not he's right or wrong, but it's also about how does it look, right? When you go to court, typically, it's not even all about the truth. It's about how things get presented and whether or not there's plausible deniability that can be planted in the minds of the jurors. And I think that's what's happening here. You know, it's changing a lot of people's opinions about, you know, the whole deportation efforts. It's like, one, you were supposed to be focusing on this, and then you went and got yourself into wars abroad. And now this is being managed so poorly that people are being shot in the middle of the street. And some of them are US citizens. And so now, rather than focusing on the domestic issues, you focused on external issues that really people don't care that much about, while domestically your house is broken. Just think of it from the standpoint of a family, right? The father of the family, rather than focusing on the needs of his family in his house, is out trying to fix everybody else's household. Meanwhile, things are breaking down in his own house. It just looks crazy. So I think that's what's happening here. And we're going to continue to see how it all plays out. But Trump needs to refocus his direction towards domestic agenda items, especially as we approach the midterms.
When does inspiration become imitation? And when does imitation become theft? Those questions are now at the center of the global artificial intelligence boom. The United States has accused a Chinese AI startup of secretly trying to use American technology. The Chinese company in question is Moonshot AI. Washington says it used technology developed by Anthropic to build its latest AI model. Beijing, of course, denies the allegation. But this latest row has raised fresh concerns about how AI models are built, who really owns them, and the technology behind them. Our next report has more. Artificial intelligence has become the world's biggest technology race. Every few months, a new model promises to change the game. Last week, China looked like it had done exactly that. A little-known startup unveiled an AI model that many said could challenge America's best. It shook Silicon Valley, and it raised fresh questions about whether Beijing was catching up faster than expected. But within days, the spotlight shifted. The same AI model is now facing serious accusations. The United States claims it was built using stolen American technology. Beijing says the allegations are unfounded. At the center of it all is a Chinese startup called Moonshot AI. Last week, the company unveiled its latest AI model called Kimi K3. Moonshot claims this is its most capable AI system so far. It says the model can rival leading AI systems from OpenAI and Anthropic. Independent benchmark tests also ranked it highly for coding and reasoning. The launch got global attention. Some experts even compared it to Chinese company DeepSeek's breakthrough last year. DeepSeek matched leading American AI models while costing far less to build. Moonshot says Kimi K3 builds on that momentum. Unlike many American rivals, it is an open-weight model. In simple terms, developers can freely download it, modify it, and build their own AI applications. But Washington sees a different story. The White House has accused Moonshot AI of secretly copying Anthropic's latest frontier AI model. It is called Fable. The US says Moonshot repeatedly accessed American AI systems through a process known as distillation. That is where one AI model learns from the responses of another. The technique itself is widely used across the industry. But Washington says Moonshot used it on an industrial scale without permission.
The United States strongly supports the free and fair development of AI. However, large-scale covert industrial distillation aimed at stealing proprietary US technology and undermining American research is unacceptable.
US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says sanctions could be considered if the allegations are substantiated. Beijing, however, is pushing back.
China's development of artificial intelligence is not only the result of advancing high-level self-reliance and strength of science and technology. Such actions will only disrupt the global development of artificial intelligence and serve the interest of no party.
This is not the first time Chinese AI firms have faced such accusations. In February, Anthropic accused Moonshot DeepSeek and another Chinese company, Minimax, of misusing its AI models. It said the companies created around 24,000 fake accounts. Those accounts generated more than 16 million interactions with Anthropic's Claude model. OpenAI has also raised similar concerns. It says Chinese firms have tried to replicate American AI systems. For now, Moonshot has not publicly responded to the latest allegations. Whether Washington can prove its case remains unclear, but the bigger picture is already coming into focus. The race is no longer just about faster chips or smarter models. It is about who controls the technology behind them. For Washington and Beijing, AI has stopped being just a business. It is becoming a strategic contest for economic, technological, and geopolitical influence. And that competition is only getting more intense. Flat is the new up. That's the new mantra dominating boardrooms. Companies are not asking how many people to hire anymore. Instead, they're wondering why hire humans at all when AI agents can do the same job faster and at a much larger scale. You must have heard, some jobs will be automated, some will be augmented, and so the tech bosses are investing large sums into AI. Now, Nobel Prize-winning economists say the world must act now. And if even half of these predictions come true, the impact will be enormous. It will impact all of us across sectors, individual careers, and it might happen sooner than we think. So far this year, around 90,000 employees have lost their jobs due to AI. Bloomberg Economics came up with a recent report last month, and here's what it found. Around 27% of workers in advanced economies, approximately 120 million in 31 countries, are likely to be affected by AI. To understand the scale, let's look at history. Between the late 1970s and the 2008 global financial crisis, the share of US workers in manufacturing sector fell by half. But now the stakes are higher because AI will not just go after manufacturing jobs, it will impact workers across sectors. These are still the early days, but there are some notable patterns in the data. Take a look at this chart. This is the industry benchmark for how AI's various models, can perform the tasks that were previously done by humans. Now, 3 years ago, every large language model excelled at mastering quick tasks. But when it comes to medium-length tasks, there is improvement in the AI models. Between 2023 and 2026, AI went from completing almost none of these tasks to completing almost all of them. That's a massive jump. But perhaps the biggest improvement happened in long tasks. In 2023, the success rate, was almost 0%. Now, certain AI models can complete 85 to 90% of complex tasks. So what does that mean for jobs? Stanford University tracked employment trends after ChatGPT became mainstream. Among workers aged 22 to 25, employment fell nearly 3% in sectors most exposed to AI, software, finance, and creative industries. That decline touched almost 13%. Now economists debate the reasons. Some blame high interest rates, others blame a slowing economy. But here's the point. When multiple indicators start pointing in the same direction, you have to stop calling them coincidences. Online job postings tell a similar story. Since ChatGPT's arrival, job vacancies involving repetitive, structured work have dropped sharply. Meanwhile, demand for analytical, technical, and AI-assisted roles has increased. Harvard Business School decided to test this shift. Researchers analyzed more than 19,000 workplace tasks across over 900 occupations. Their conclusion? Jobs that are easy to automate are requiring fewer skills than before. Meanwhile, jobs that work with AI now demand entirely new skills. So if you are wondering if your job is at risk or not, it mentions the potential of automation due to AI. Or in simple terms, which jobs are going to be most impacted due to artificial intelligence? Now let's also talk about the winners and the losers. According to Forbes, financial managers top the risk list. More than 80% of their tasks could be influenced by AI. Computer and mathematical jobs, nearly 70%. Legal professionals, office administrators, business operations, even senior management. Turns out the corner office isn't immune either. If your daily tasks consist of analyzing spreadsheets, reading documents, preparing reports, or making predictable decisions, AI is already applying for your job. And unlike humans, it never negotiates a salary, so the tech has an edge. But which jobs are going to be the least impacted? Construction, mechanics, healthcare, personal care, basically physical jobs, or work that require a more hands-on approach. But before we declare the end of work, let's slow down because reality is refusing to follow Silicon Valley's marketing brochure. AI companies love talking about replacing employees. They rarely talk about replacing electricity bills or cloud computing costs. AI systems work using tokens. Tokens are tiny pieces of text processed every second. On an average, one token is roughly equivalent to 3/4 of an English word. This year, the number of tokens used by companies has exploded into the trillions. Most of it isn't people chatting with chatbots. It's AI agents doing real work. Many companies discovered something unexpected. The AI employee was becoming very expensive. Some firms have now started rationing AI usage because operating these powerful systems costs far more than expected. Imagine replacing employees only to discover your virtual workforce wants an even bigger budget. That is the plot twist. To offset these costs, some Western companies are increasingly turning to cheaper AI models inspired by Chinese technology, which means the economics of automation may improve rapidly. Today's expensive AI could become tomorrow's bargain employee, and that's why the story is far from over. Technology doesn't simply eliminate work, it transforms it. And of course, transitions are painful. They reward those who adapt and punish those who...
Do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? You may qualify for the IRS Fresh Start program.
Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is a massive hit. There are no two ways about it. The movie made $264 million on its opening weekend. And 6 days in, it has raked in over $300 million worldwide. It's another great success by the legendary Nolan. However, one of its staunchest critics still isn't convinced. And that critic also happens to be the world's richest man. Elon Musk has been whining about the film since before it was released because of Nolan's casting choices. Now, no surprise that a man born in apartheid South Africa would have problems there. But this apartheid-era relic has something most peers don't. Elon Musk has an AI company, and he's threatening to release his own AI version of The Odyssey before the end of the year. Here's our report.
Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is a commercial success, but it's also quite controversial because Nolan cast Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy. A number of people complained when it was revealed she would be playing the mythical Helen. Some of them were Greek people, who are the inheritors of the epic poem. However, a lot of the people complaining happen to be from other countries. This includes a very famous man born in apartheid South Africa and now living in the US. Elon Musk, the world's richest man, apparently has a lot of spare time. Instead of worrying about getting spaceships to Mars or improving Tesla sales, Musk prefers to spend his time complaining that Nolan didn't make Helen of Troy white. Musk has been whining for months, ever since the casting choice was revealed. But it seems he was especially annoyed on Wednesday for some reason. Musk started by saying he would fund a different adaptation directed by Mel Gibson. He said he was game to give Mel Gibson $100 million. But about 10 minutes later, Musk seems to have changed his mind. It looks like he spotted a way to plug in his own business. He said that before the end of this year, Grok Imagine would make a full-length, historically accurate Odyssey. First, let's look at Grok Imagine. It's an AI image and video generator. It's one of the products offered by Musk's company, xAI. So it's no surprise that Musk would try to promote it. With that out of the way, let's look at the core issue. Musk is mad that Helen isn't white. He accused Nolan of not making his movie historically accurate. That's a strange statement because Helen is mythical. She is said to have been born from an egg. Helen's father was the Greek god Zeus. He seduced her mother after transforming into a swan. So her mother laid an egg, which Helen of Troy hatched out of. Think about that for a second. Musk is crying about the historical accuracy of a swan egg baby? And this is the richest man on the planet. Fantastic. But okay, let's go a little further down this rabbit hole. People who have complained about the casting say that Homer described Helen of Troy as white-armed. That is a euphemism, a creative way of saying that she was an aristocrat who did not work in the fields. Remember, The Odyssey is a poem. It should not be surprising that it can be poetic. Somebody tell that to Elon Musk.
It looks like we officially need to stop saying humans are in control of AI. Sam Altman and the crew at OpenAI built a super advanced AI agent strictly to test cybersecurity. It looked at the test, walked out of the test, went rogue on the internet, and launched a full-scale cyber attack on a completely different AI platform. The AI built to protect the internet ended up becoming its biggest headache. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell a story.
Okay. Well, that's the show today, guys. We've had a lot of different segments covered. Definitely check out First Post. I believe they're a really good publication when it comes to getting fair and accurate information. They're actually based out in India. And when you don't really trust your news, your mainstream news media in a particular country, it's good to find an alternative that can give you good objective news without you having to question their motives and whose side they're on, right? So in this case, I endorse First Post. I tend to use it, and that's been sort of my source news publication at this time. But I thank you guys for joining. I definitely ask that you stay connected, like and subscribe to the channel. And also weigh in, leave your comments on some of the segments that was covered today. We talked about AI and the advancements in that. I personally feel that consumers, with regards to the AI situation, can put an end to all of this stuff. What would happen if consumers said to themselves, I can buy an AI product off the shelf, but because I want my neighbors to be able to keep their house, I want my community to keep going, I want people to be gainfully employed, I will only buy products from human employed firms. So if there's a firm on the shelf that's AI generated and there's a firm on the shelf that's from a human employed person, I'm only going to buy human employed products. If consumers started saying that, all this AI hoopla will go away, because ultimately the choice is ours. I can buy the product that was made in AI, or I can buy the product that was made by hand with consumers. You see it in the supercar market, right? There's certain cars that are handmade cars, the Bugattis, some of these really exotic cars, they're made by hand. And guess what? A select few people are willing to pay a premium to buy those cars because they're made by hand and they appreciate the craftsmanship of those individuals. Mercedes typically has their engineers sign the car to say it was actually worked on by a real person, right? And people tend to support that. I think that's eventually going to be the next wave when products and services are being provided by AI. The way you can keep your community intact and keep people gainfully employed is just by making the decision as a society, we're going to buy from human-based people and not just from AIs. That's not to say that there's not certain things where AI services may be useful, but we don't all have to go unemployed simply because AI is here. If your consumers and your collective group says, we don't want to do that, we're going to go and support, our community and only purchase items that are made in our communities, then all this AI nonsense goes out of the window because of the purchasing power. So that's something to keep in mind, especially as people start to panic over what will happen with AI. That's definitely something to keep in mind. All right, guys, thanks again. Leave your comments, your thoughts. I welcome your feedback. And until we speak again, God bless.